Alright, this will be a video clearing up some disinfo that the Skeptical Heretic likes to spread around. And I saw people in comments, specifically I saw, let's see, who is this person? Soul Scorcher repeated this. And that's problematic. When you see people repeating things that the Skeptical Heretic says, that's bad news. Probably close to 100% of the time. Okay, so the argument goes like this. 85% of all variation within humanity is within races, only 15% is between races, meaning that the racial differences only comprise 15% of all the variation in humanity. Okay? And what the Skeptical Heretic then goes on to claim is that because of this, there's only, if you take a white person, someone who's a white person, clearly a white person, and you take a black person, you're only 57.5% likely to be more related to the white person than you are to the random white person than you are to the random black person, and you are 42.5% more likely to be more related to the random black person than you are to the random white person. Meaning that there's a very good chance that you are more related to the random black person than you are to the random white person. And this is of course repeated by, amazingly, this falsehood is repeated by people in academia who are of course non-geneticists, but it's repeated by sociologists, and this is simply not true. And to explain why this is not true, you can think of this in terms of a binomial probability. Let's take a gene here. This is not a real gene, but this is just to illustrate the principle. And people who are watching this in good faith can take models to understand principles. Okay? On this gene, you have allele A and allele B. Whites have the A allele 60% of the time and the B allele 40% of the time. Blacks have the A allele 40% of the time and the B allele 60% of the time. If you were to categorize, say what someone's race is based on this one gene, you would have a 60% correspondence between their social race category and the genetic category, because you're only using one gene, right? Meaning 60% of white people would have the quote-unquote white allele, and 60% of black people would have the quote-unquote black allele. And 40% would have the quote-unquote wrong allele and would be classified quote-unquote wrongly. And this just means that there would be a 60% concordance rate or correspondence between self-identified race and genetically identified race at this one gene. However, if you do a binomial probability, let's say that on average there is a roughly 60-40 racial split on each gene. Now, not all genes are going to be inverses of each other. Not all genes are going to differ racially this much. Some will differ even more. Okay, but if we assume, say, a 0.6, a probability of success on a single trial, let's say that's 0.6. Say the number of trials, let's say you have what? Let's say there's 20,000, I think there's more, but say there's 20,000 genomes in the human genomes, and the number of successes that we need is 10,00001. That. At this point, this little StatTrek online calculator, I don't have a graphing calculator, gives us virtually 1. I mean, it's infinitesimally unlikely that you're going to be more related to someone of another race than of someone of your own race, unless you get, and of course this is assuming pure races. Of course, in reality, more people are mixed, so it's not going to be quite 1, but it's not going to be this crazy low number that the Skeptical Heretic seems to think it is. And I would also have a link to the Neil Risch study, which was done a long time ago, but it's pretty basic, straightforward stuff. They just took people's self-identified race, then they analyzed at 426 points, and they put them into best fit genetic clusters, and they found that these best fit genetic clusters corresponded with self-identified race 99.86% of the time. And that's only using 426 genes. If you use more genes, you would expect an even higher correspondence, okay, except for people who really were, for example, 60% white by ancestry, but declared themselves black or something. Like those people, right? That would be just an instance of people getting their own ancestry wrong, okay? And of course, if you watched Race, something of an illusion, Race, the Power of an Illusion, in that series, they do a little genetic test for the people in there, and they found that, oh, genetically, you're black or something, okay? But what they're doing is they're using like 15 markers or something, a ridiculously small number of markers, and so when you use a small number of markers, you're going to get these discordance rates. You're going to get these high rates of cross-classification. And so the 85% variation within the between, that applies to each individual gene, not whole genome aggregates. The odds that someone who's, blonde hair, blue-eyed, is going to be more related to a random black person than they are to another random white person is virtually zero. Okay. Now, maybe you get some people who visually appear to be mixed race. For those people, yeah, the results are going to be more mixed, right? But the idea that basically what the skeptical heretic is saying is just not understanding this thing. Like he's just not understanding the basic science, and the science is not complicated here, right? I am a layman. Well, so is Evogen. So is Hannibal Barca. And so is the skeptical heretic, and so is Sophia Rune. I've learned that Sophia Rune is not a geneticist, but a botanist, so she's not like a real geneticist. She's taken some classes on genetics, right? You need to know some genetics for botany, but she's not like a real geneticist. And neither is Concordance, apparently. He works for some geneticists, but he himself is not a geneticist. So all this stuff about like people like the pros from Dover disagreeing with me, well, you're not pros in this stuff. And moreover, geneticists and botanists don't do heritability estimates, all right? And what Sophia Rune is talking about in terms of heritability is actually stuff that she's taught herself. In the fields, like in animal genetics and in botany, you don't do heritability estimates of traits, right? You don't say what proportion of the observed variance in a trait is attributable to environment. So that's what I wanted to say here. Hopefully this kind of disinfo regarding more variation within the between can be combated a little bit, but I'm not getting my hopes up because you people are cultists.